joined by fellow founder of Punch Bowl News, Jake Sherman, and thank you so much, the Ohio Democrat, we can sit down, who is also chair of the CBC. We are here as part of our series, The Road to Recovery, which is being sponsored by Goldman Sachs' 10,000 Small Businesses Voices. We want to thank them for helping make today's conversation possible. We are going to be focusing mostly on the recovery out of the pandemic, particularly for Black small business owners, and the uneven recovery and what all needs to still be done. But before we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Jake here.
After our conversation with Chairman Beatty, and by the way, it's an incredibly busy week in Washington.
So
we're very fortunate and very lucky that Congresswoman is here. Two small business owners from her district, Letha Pugh and Halima Shafiq, will join us on stage for a fireside chat. Very excited. We hope everyone finds the conversations very useful, very fun. Please share them on all social media platforms where you can find us at Punch Bowl News on Twitter, Instagram, every single platform you can find us on.
All right, and with that, we are going to get this conversation started. We're going to talk a lot about the recovery, but before we do, as Jake noted, it is a very busy week in Washington. We've got government funding, we've got the debt ceiling, infrastructure, reconciliation. How concerned are you that Democrats haven't pivoted to a Democratic-only strategy when it comes to raising the debt ceiling?
Well, I think when you look at history of what has happened in the past, whether that was through a Republican leadership or Democratic leadership, the one thing at the end of the day that members of Congress realize is that the nation has to continue. Raising the debt ceiling is not something that we've not witnessed before. We know it happened in the last administration, and we know when we get to the appropriate time, we will check in with those who know best. I mean, look at it. You have Jay Powell, you have Janet Yellen, and they're all weighing in because of their skills and their background. So I'm not quite sure I would say that we don't have a Democratic strategy for it. I would just say as we are prioritizing the things on our plate, we know the timetable for that. And I am very comfortable when it gets to the timetable that we have to do that. Now, that could be 2 days from now, or that could be October the 1st. But at that time...
Or later.
Or later. At that time, we will not fail this country. Democrats are in charge, and for anyone who knows our speaker, you know she can count, she can strategize, and we win.
Whenever I begin to doubt Democratic strategy, we're always reminded that it's difficult to count Nancy Pelosi out of any legislative battle because she always finds a way out. Let me ask you this. Your colleague Alma Adams from North Carolina said last week, I think we broke the news, that she was not satisfied with the money that's going to historically Black colleges and universities in the legislation, not to use jargon. I'm wondering if that's something, I'm assuming that's something that's shared across the CBC, and I actually think it has bipartisan support with Republicans on the other side of the aisle. I'm curious if that's how you view that and what exactly you're seeking money-wise in the bill.
That's a very top priority for the Congressional Black Caucus. Alma Adams has done an amazing job. She's spent most, if not all of her life in higher education with HBCUs. I'm also a HBCU graduate, as everyone in my family is. But when you look at the $55 billion that we saw that was going into HBCUs, we were very excited. Her disappointment has come because as we were working through the process, when you hear now we may be getting $2 billion, that's certainly disheartening and it's not acceptable. And I think you're absolutely right. We have bipartisan caucuses. There's an HBCU caucus. We had a diversity and inclusion HBCU forum right before the pandemic. And we had as many of my Republican colleagues there because here's the deal. You know, I connect people to policies to politics. HBCU students and faculty vote. And HBCUs are located in members of Congress districts, and that includes majority members as well as Republican members. And so I think we will garner the support we will need to tackle this issue.
Can I just press down a little bit harder on that really quickly? What does that look like? And if it's, you guys requested obviously a very large number. What do you think that looks like in a final package?
Well, what I can tell you is it does not look like $2 billion.
All right, somewhere between 2 and 55.
Somewhere well above 2 and closer to 55.
Okay.
Noted.
All right, let's turn our attention to the issue of the day, the road to recovery out of the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to set the stage a little bit because we're partnering with Goldman Sachs' 10,000 Voices, and they do a lot of surveys. They've done 10 surveys over the last year and a half, and they have found consistently that there is an uneven recovery for Black-owned small businesses. The stats are pretty stunning. 20% of Black-owned small businesses are very confident that they would have access to capital if they needed. That's 11% lower than their peers. 57% of Black small business owners say they are still struggling financially due to the impact of COVID-19 compared to 44% overall. What more needs to be done at the federal level? Is that surprising to you, or is this just kind of a long-standing problem that's been exacerbated by the pandemic?
I think it's a long-standing problem that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. It's not surprising to me. It's disappointing that we're still dealing with this. As a former small business owner, I understand it. And I think there are a lot of things that play into it now. If you're already behind the 8 ball, and then you have this global pandemic, we know the numbers, and you've read them off. We know the disparities. We know access to capital is a problem. We know that they're not the protege programs that are set out there, and that's why we're thanking Goldman Sachs for setting up a program like this and making it a real investment. You know, not a one-day workshop and you're supposed to go out and be a successful business owner. That's the same as saying you want to be a surgeon, but I'm going to invite you to a workshop and tomorrow you go, operate on someone. Businesses are like that. I mean, people are making an investment in their life, and we know for Black Americans and Brown Americans, and we know also for women, that we started out with a disadvantage because of cultural issues, societal issues, and government issues. If you're not in the room to help make the difference, oftentimes you're not thought about. So when I'm in the room, and they're meeting with me, whether it's as the chair of the subcommittee on diversity and inclusion, or as the powerful Congressional Black Caucus chair, largest caucus in the Congress with a 50-year history, it makes a difference because I see things that other people don't see, but I also am in a position to speak up and make things happen. Being here today, what a great venue to talk about these issues to expose other individuals.
One thing that we kicked off the series about a month ago with Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia. We talked about credit, and his statistic is pretty stunning. Black-owned businesses that are low credit risks are half as likely as white-owned companies to receive the money they're seeking, loans they're seeking. Bank executives, people in Congress all know about this problem. What can Congress do? What can the federal government do to help alleviate that?
I think I can give you a great example that we demonstrated, and that was when we put the PPP dollars out. Everyone was excited about the amount of dollars that we had that was going out to businesses, but then what happened? Small businesses weren't included in that first round. And I want to be very clear, it was government, and specifically members of the Congressional Black Caucus that went to the microphone, that went into the committees, and started talking about mom and pop businesses, started talking about those with 1099 employees, or started talking about businesses like the 2 small businesses that you're having on your program today, who happen to be from my district, businesses that I support, and pushed hard that we carve out dollars to make sure that they went to MDIs, or that we set up programs putting dollars in. We also started holding banks responsible, because here was another major problem that all of us, if not most of us rather, missed. They said, if you have a relationship with your bank, you will be in good standing. Well, to me, a relationship meant you had an account there. You know, you could use that XYZ bank to open your business. That's not what it meant by relationship. It meant that you had already had access to that same amount of a loan at least once or multiple times. Well, what if you had your account there for, 5 years, 10 years, but you had been putting money into the bank, but you had not been asking now for a $250,000 loan?
So it's a catch-22.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to fix that. We have to make sure those that did not know their background. I mean, some people, when they're starting up a business, they go to the bank. And they go to whomever will help them in that bank. But they're often not included in some of the rooms that many of us, or I had the great fortune to have a private banker, to have someone who's watching my account, to have someone advising me. Especially for women and Black women, that did not happen.
I want to talk about the COVID-19 Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. The White House recently announced that it's going to expand that, extend it for businesses. How hopeful are you that this is going to ensure that small businesses get that working capital they need? Is there more that needs to be done, or do you think that's going to be enough in the short term?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it is a great start. Certainly, I applaud them because we have had many successes, as you're going to hear today. Once we got it right, we have to fix it. So I think we know now how to monitor it better. I think now we know how to work with our SBAs on it. We know how to work with the banks. And here's the other thing. Sometimes when you have a problem or disaster and you can turn it around, you learn from those mistakes. And so now they have many watchdogs. We have meetings. Everybody's asking the right questions now. Because you have the history. Then you have the members of Congress, the small business owners, the financial services, and a lot of the other caucuses watchdogging this. But here's the good thing. We have a different administration now than we had when we first started with this global pandemic. And certainly I'd be remiss if I did not say this administration, which by the way has more female and more people of color. And so when you're in the room and you're saying something, we all benefit.
And we'd be remiss to say that a former CBC member, Kamala Harris was a CBC member, and Cedric Richmond
Absolutely.
has the presidency here. So those are two CBC members pretty high in this administration. So let's talk about the reconciliation package and and your priorities in it vis-a-vis some of these topics. What do you think? Does this do enough for the issues you're talking about? If you could wave a wand and have any provision added immediately, which maybe you can't do. I don't know. What would be in it, and what are you looking for more that's not there already?
I think if I could wave a wand, I would wave it for us to come together and pass what's there. We've spent a great deal of time looking at the safety nets that are needed, looking at what people, whether it's in the business industry or if it's someone sitting at home going into the workplace for the first time, and what they need with child care, what they need with looking at housing dollars, what we need for small businesses to help them. And some of those things don't have an immediate direct linkage when you think about it. So when you say small business and you say child care in the same breath, think about the value of what we're offering in the child care package that will allow a mother or a father or both parents to feel that their child is safe and they can go to work or go back to work. When you look at housing, I guess some of the things that I would say is that we make sure that we cover the primary issues and worry about the dollars later. There's been too much fixation on the price of the ticket. We know that will get negotiated, but what we're doing is pricing out the needs. And for me, I'd wave the wand to say, let's take care of the safety nets. Let's take care of all the needs. Let's make sure that all of those individuals who will benefit will know how wonderful this America is, and that's why we're building back better.
I I want to talk about that. That was one of the big issues in terms of if you were to get all these things for the social safety network is what happens with taxes, both corporate and individual. There's been a lot of haggling over that, a lot of consternation. How do you view that?
Well, I think when you look at the package, you will see closing the tax loopholes. You will see that that also benefits small businesses. Part of the issue is the lack of access to capital. Part of the issue is the tax code and what happens when you look at individuals and what they pay versus those who are in the top 1 or 2%. It's wrong. We have to fix that. And you even have people who are in those categories. I remember when we first started talking about it during my time in Congress, Warren Buffett came out and supported us and said that there's no way his housekeeper, should not benefit in the same way, if not greater, than he was benefiting. And so I think people know it's the right thing to do. I think too much of our politics have gotten in the way, and certainly since January the 6th, in the last administration, I have no problem saying it, the country has been turned inside out. And we have to get back on the right track. We've always had differences when we talk about Democrats and Republicans, but never at the latitude and the stage where we just have things that are disgusting and comments and statements that affect people in a way that I've never witnessed in my life, in business or politics.
I would have just asked one question. I mean, that presumably has impacted you a good deal too. I mean, we hear stories all the time. I mean, that must have impacted you in a pretty significant way.
It has impacted me as an individual. People look at us as members of Congress, but I'm still, a constituent to someone. I'm a grandmother. It affects my grandchildren. It affects, my elderly relatives when we look at what's happening to Medicaid and Medicare. And so I think that's why it's good that we now have an administration that puts people first, puts country first. And I don't think that we want to lose sight of that.
So on that, you mentioned prescription drugs, you mentioned healthcare. Let's talk for just 1 second about that as it relates to the reconciliation bill. Kind of a bit of a skirmish in the Democratic caucus over prescription drug program in the reconciliation bill. How comfortable do you feel with the proposal as written already?
Oh, I'm comfortable we will get there. If I ask you or anyone watching us today if we have a perfect family, the answer is going to be no. Many of us have dysfunctional families. But at the end of the day, family is always family. And so when people ask me about within our caucus, whether it's the Congressional Black Caucus or whether it's the Democratic Caucus, that's what diversity is about. And so we value and appreciate the differences of thought, the differences of the people you represent, the districts you represent, but we're in the majority because we understand the value of coming together and the sacrifices that you make. But at the end of the day, when we look at healthcare, when we look at prescriptions, we've had a long history of what we call closing that donut with prescription drugs. We have a long history of making sure that young people, who I need to remind you, those who were 26 years or younger, were able to stay on their parents' insurance because we continue to fight against opposition, even when we were in the minority for an affordable care plan. Look what it did for women. And if I ask younger, young, or more seasoned individuals if you've ever had a pre-existing condition, the answer is yes. So you were able to be insured. And so what you will see is us looking at the whole spectrum of healthcare, prescription drugs, so we can make sure that we get it right and continue to provide those services for the American people.
All right, we are almost out of time, but before we let you go, the Congressional Black Caucus is, as you mentioned, large and powerful as it's probably ever been. There's a chance the next Speaker of the House could be a member. Jim Clyburn or Jeffries are often discussed.
Or maybe you.
Maybe yourself. How much do you think about that with Pelosi wrapping up her tenure?
Well, if in fact Speaker Pelosi has decided that she is wrapping up her tenure, then I would say, if you're asking me in any hat I wear, I would love to see the names that you mentioned be the next speaker. And that's not because they are Black Americans. It's because I view them as the most talented individuals that we could have because of their skills, what they bring to the table. Hakeem Jeffries is my classmate. We're extremely close. And certainly I would support him without any question. Majority Whip Clyburn mentored me, helped bring me to Congress, supported me against the odds of other leaders or those in leadership, so I'll always be grateful to him. We also know that we've done a good job of delivering for the people. Clyburn, according to the President of the United States, but for him and his leadership, would not be president. Hakeem Jeffries is one of the most brilliant individuals in Congress, in my opinion, and most comfortable with himself, and I think that's what's important, and that's what we see in Nancy Pelosi. She's comfortable with herself, and that you must have. You tell me another Black man in Congress that can rap and then speak with judiciary elegance in the same breath.
And on the House floor.
And on the House floor,
yeah.
and people unequivocally follow him and like him. And thank you for including my name. That's always good press. But I have no interest in being speaker at this time.
Oh. This time is already passed, okay?
All right, we'll let you leave it there, but thank you so much, Congressman. We really appreciate your time this morning and having this important conversation.
No, thank you for having me on your platform.
Work around some of the challenges we're having with the supply chain itself. And I co-own a gluten-free wholesale and retail bakery in Columbus, Ohio, along with my wife. We had a wholesale sector that we supplied.
Make me happy. Everybody have fun.
Make me
Tell
happy.
everybody you should buy
Go visit Columbus and go there.
And, you know, we had a very robust wholesale arm. We supplied to universities, corporate cafeterias, you know, all of that disappeared overnight. We did have a sit-in dining area that we, you know, quickly pivoted to providing more like a retail carry-out services for folks. It's been an up and a down year for us. We did have an increase in revenue, but we also had a significant increase in expenses. We're struggling with supply chain issues. We are struggling with keeping staff morale where it needs to be, and so, you know, I think there's been an emotional toll with all of this, and there's the financial, you know, toll as well. But I believe we will eventually get through this. I just think, you know, right now is kind of the time to just kind of hunker down and not a lot of extras, and you know, hopefully we'll see some light here coming. We thought we all kind of got to take our masks off, and I had to go in and say, well, we'll just put them all back on, and you know, that was hard to do as well.
Could you, I mean, you heard Congressman Beatty talk about some of the statistics about uneven recovery for Black small business owners, in particular when it comes to access.
You know, take some of that scope and put it in sections so that a small business could perform. That might be helpful. The other places, the Congresswoman mentioned mentor protege programs. Having a solid program where you have a larger business mentoring smaller businesses, working with them to help them to grow in the federal procurement space. Some of the other areas might be, for example, I am a Black woman-owned small business. I am also a U.S. Army veteran and a service-disabled veteran. So, you know, there are a lot of areas on a contract where someone has a goal to meet and they can check off those areas. There is a box on the same contract sometimes for a minority business enterprise. However, there's no goal set in place. Also, there could be a focus on having procurement officers try to work consciously with Black-owned businesses. that could be another way that we could be helped to have access to contracts.
I want to, we're quickly running out of time.
Business, and particularly with banks, if there was a public scorecard that would show, this particular bank is, this is the percentage of folks that they work with from these specific communities. I think from a representation matters standpoint, that would be helpful. I think one thing that they learned with the PPP loan and all these different financial supports, that some of Black-owned businesses are in need of technical support. The accounting piece, maybe some business strategy, and how could we help support them with those businesses in order to make them bankable, and then have some accountability as well on the banking side.
And I would add to that also with the capital, access to capital piece, I've even heard some banking representatives on calls as if they were talking about additional funding, whether it be IDLE or PPP, say that, they're excited to get the funds, but they don't want to have to create new programs for specific businesses to be able to have access to that lending. I think that is a thought that banks should be having, is how can we create a program that allows us to fund these federal dollars that everyone's contributed to back to the small business owners that need it, and in a way that they understand that they do have an opportunity to get access to capital when it's needed. I want to ask you one other question before we go, which is, obviously
All right.
Oh, good. That was nice.
Love that, and that's what happens when you get majority companies and things started working. Then you get spin-offs, and that's what I mean when we all come together. I would say, but for having successful people like these two, a lot of times then we get really engaged. It's because of when you're in the room, you see something, you do something. So I love